I never imagined my life would take such a drastic turn. It's funny how you can go through years of marriage thinking you know someone, only to have that illusion shattered in an instant. My name is John, and I've been married to my wife Lisa for 10 years. We don't have any kids, which is probably for the best given how things have turned out. Our relationship started off strong like any typical love story. We met through mutual friends, hit it off immediately, and before long we were inseparable. Lisa was beautiful, smart, and had a certain fiery spirit that I admired. We traveled, laughed, and built a life together. But as the years went by, subtle cracks began to appear. It started with little things. Lisa becoming more secretive, spending longer hours out of the house, and her phone always glued to her hand. At first, I brushed it off as work-related stress, or just needing some space. I didn't want to be the paranoid husband who questioned every move she made. Besides, I trusted her. Or at least, I thought I did. Then there was my younger brother, Tom. 5 years younger than me, Tom was the quintessential golden boy of the family. Charming, good-looking, and always the center of attention. He moved to our city a couple of years ago, and naturally we spent a lot of time together. He and Lisa seemed to get along well, which I was happy about. Family is important, and I wanted us all to be close. Looking back now, the signs were all there, but I was too blind to see them. Lisa's sudden enthusiasm for attending family gatherings, the private jokes they shared, and the occasional glance that lingered a bit too long. I chalked it up to them just being friendly. After all, Tom was practically family to her too. But then, the arguments started. Lisa became increasingly volatile, lashing out over the smallest things. Her moods were unpredictable, and her excuses for late nights out became flimsier. Our communication, once open and honest, turned into a series of lies and half-truths. I was caught in a whirlwind of confusion, trying to understand what had gone wrong. Little did I know, my world was about to be turned upside down. It was a Wednesday evening, and I had come home early from work. The office was slow, and I figured it would be nice to surprise Lisa with a quiet dinner together. When I walked into the house, it was unusually silent. Normally, Lisa would be watching TV or chatting on the phone, but that night, there was an eerie stillness. I headed upstairs to our bedroom to change out of my work clothes. As I approached the door, I heard muffled voices, Lisa's unmistakable laughter followed by a male voice. My heart began to race. I paused, trying to convince myself that I was overreacting. But as I pushed open the door, the scene before me shattered any illusions I had left. There, in our bed, were Lisa and Tom, tangled together in the most intimate of embraces. The shock paralyzed me for a moment. My mind struggled to process what my eyes were seeing. My wife and my brother, naked and entwined in the bed we shared. It felt like a cruel joke, a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. "John!" Lisa shrieked, scrambling to cover herself with the sheets. Tom jumped up, his face a mix of guilt and fear. "John, it's not what it looks like!" she stammered. I couldn't speak. Rage surged through me, hotter and more intense than anything I'd ever felt. My vision narrowed, and all I could see was Tom, the brother I had trusted, now a betrayer in the worst possible way. "Get out!" I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Get out of my house!" Tom started to stammer an apology, but I wasn't in the mood to hear it. I lunged at him, my fist connecting with his jaw with a satisfying crack. He staggered back, but I didn't stop. Years of pent-up frustration and betrayal fueled my punches. I hit him again and again, each blow a release of the hurt and anger that had been building inside me. Lisa screamed, trying to pull me off Tom, but I was unstoppable. I pinned him to the floor, my fists raining down on him. Blood spattered from his nose and mouth, his eyes wide with terror. "You piece of shit!" I shouted. "You think you can come into my home, my marriage, and destroy everything? How could you do this to me?" Tom tried to shield himself, but I kept swinging until my knuckles were raw and my breath came in ragged gasps. Finally, I stepped back, panting, my chest heaving with exertion. Tom lay on the floor, bruised and bloody, struggling to catch his breath. "John, please stop!" Lisa sobbed, kneeling beside Tom. "I'm sorry. We're sorry." "Sorry?" I spat, glaring at her. "Sorry doesn't cut it, Lisa. How long has this been going on?" She looked away, her face streaked with tears. "A few months," she admitted quietly. "It just happened. We didn't mean for it to go this far." "You didn't mean for it to go this far?" I echoed, incredulous. "You didn't mean to have sex with my brother in our bed? Do you think I'm that stupid?" I grabbed my coat and stormed out of the house, unable to stand the sight of them any longer. I needed to get away, to clear my head. As I drove aimlessly through the city, the reality of the situation began to sink in. My wife and my brother, two people I loved and trusted more than anyone, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. The pain was overwhelming, a physical ache in my chest. I pulled over to the side of the road and rested my head on the steering wheel, letting the tears flow freely. I had no idea what to do next, but one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning I woke up in a dingy motel room, the events of the previous night playing on a loop in my head. I had checked into the first place I found, unable to face returning to the home I shared with Lisa. My body ached from the fight, and my knuckles were swollen and bruised. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional wreckage I felt inside. I knew I couldn't avoid this forever. I had to go back and confront Lisa, demand answers, and figure out what to do next. But every time I thought about seeing her face, I felt a fresh wave of anger and betrayal. By mid-morning, I mustered up enough courage to drive back home. As I pulled into the driveway, my heart pounded in my chest. The house looked the same as always, a stark contrast to the turmoil within. I opened the door to find Lisa sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes red from crying. She looked up as I entered, her expression a mix of guilt and desperation. "John, we need to talk," she started, her voice trembling. "Talk?" I barked, my anger flaring up again. "There's nothing to talk about, Lisa. You f***ed my brother. What more is there to say?" "Please, John, just let me explain," she pleaded, standing up and reaching out towards me. I recoiled from her touch, the thought of her hands on me repulsive. "Explain? You want to explain how you betrayed me? How you and Tom lied to my face and slept together in our bed?" My voice rose with each word until I was shouting, the fury boiling over. "John, it was a mistake," she cried, tears streaming down her face. "It didn't mean anything. I was lonely, and Tom was there. It just happened." "Just happened?" I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Things like this don't just happen, Lisa. You made a choice. Both of you did." I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Tom's number. Without hesitation, I hit the call button. The phone rang a few times before he picked up. "John, man, I'm so sorry." Tom's voice came through the speaker, weak and pleading. "Save it," I snapped. "I don't want to hear your pathetic excuses. You betrayed me in the worst way possible, and I don't think I can ever forgive you for this." "John, please, I never meant to hurt you," Tom begged. "It just got out of hand." "Got out of hand?" I shouted into the phone. "You f***ed my wife, Tom. My wife! In my own house. How do you even justify that?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Tom's voice came back, quieter, almost broken. "I don't have an excuse, John. I messed up. I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't fix this," I said, my voice icy. "You need to stay away from me. From us. I don't want to see you, hear from you, or even know you exist. Do you understand?" "John, please," Tom started, but I cut him off. "Do you understand?" I repeated, my voice shaking with anger. "Yes," Tom finally replied, his voice barely a whisper. "I understand." I ended the call and tossed my phone onto the table, my whole body trembling with rage. Lisa stood there, looking at me with wide, tear-filled eyes. "John, I'm so sorry," she whispered, stepping towards me. "Don't," I warned, holding up a hand to stop her. "I don't want to hear it. I don't want your apologies, your excuses, or your tears. You made your bed, Lisa. Now lie in it." With that, I turned and walked out of the house, slamming the door behind me. I needed to get away, to clear my head and figure out how to move forward. As I drove aimlessly through the city once again, the weight of the betrayal settled heavily on my shoulders. There was no going back from this. My marriage was over, and I had to find a way to pick up the pieces of my shattered life. The days that followed were a blur. I found myself drifting through life in a haze, barely aware of my surroundings. The pain was a constant companion, gnawing at my insides, and no matter what I did, I couldn't escape it. Lisa called me several times, but I ignored every call. I couldn't bear to hear her voice, to listen to her try and justify what she'd done. Nights were the worst. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our marriage, trying to pinpoint where it had all gone wrong. Sleep was a distant memory. When I did manage to drift off, My dreams were filled with images of Lisa and Tom together, their betrayal replaying over and over in my mind. I couldn't stay in the motel forever, so I rented a small apartment on the other side of town. It was sparse, just the basics: a bed, a couch, and a small table, but it was enough. It was a place where I could be alone, away from the reminders of the life I had once known. One night, about a week after the confrontation, I found myself sitting on the floor of my new apartment, a bottle of whiskey by my side. The alcohol numbed the pain slightly, but it also brought with it a clarity I hadn't felt before. The anger and hurt were still there, but beneath it all was a profound sadness. I had lost not just my wife, but also my brother. Two of the most important people in my life had betrayed me, and I felt adrift, cut off from the world. The loneliness was suffocating. I wondered how long Lisa and Tom had been sneaking around behind my back. Was it just a fling, or had there been real feelings involved? Did they laugh about me, thinking I would never find out? In a moment of weakness, I picked up my phone and called an old friend, Mike. He was one of the few people I felt I could trust. We hadn't talked much in recent years, but I needed someone to talk to, someone who knew me before all this chaos. "John?" "Hey man, it's been a while," Mike answered, his voice warm and familiar. "Hey Mike," I said, my voice cracking. "Can we meet up? I need to talk to someone." "Of course," he replied without hesitation. "Let's meet at our old spot." We agreed to meet at a small bar we used to frequent back in the day. When I arrived, Mike was already there, a concerned look on his face. We ordered a couple of beers, and I started to tell him everything. The words poured out of me. The betrayal, the anger, the sadness. Mike listened quietly, letting me get it all out. "Jesus, John," he said when I finally finished. "I'm so sorry, man. I can't even imagine what you're going through." "Thanks, Mike," I said, feeling a small measure of relief just from having shared my burden. "I don't know what to do. I feel so lost." "You're going to get through this," he said firmly. "It's going to be hell for a while, but you're strong. You don't have to face this alone." We spent the rest of the evening talking about old times, trying to recapture some of the camaraderie we once had. It wasn't a solution, but it was a start. Mike's support gave me a glimmer of hope, a reminder that not everyone in my life was a source of pain. Over the next few weeks, I focused on keeping myself busy. I threw myself into work, took up running again, and tried to find small moments of normalcy. The pain didn't disappear, but it became more manageable. The memories of Lisa and Tom still haunted me, but I was determined not to let them define me. I also started to reconnect with old friends, people I had lost touch with over the years. It was strange reaching out after so long, but I found comfort in their familiar faces and shared histories. They reminded me of who I was before my life had been upended. And slowly, I began to feel a little more like myself. One evening, as I was jogging through the park, I ran into Sarah, an old college friend. We had dated briefly before deciding we were better off as friends. She had moved back to town recently, and we decided to catch up over coffee. As we talked, I realized how much I had missed having genuine connections with people. Sarah was easy to talk to, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I laughed. It was a small thing, but it felt significant. "John, I know you've been through hell," Sarah said, her eyes full of empathy. "But you're one of the strongest people I know. You'll get through this, and if you need anything, I'm here." Her words meant more to me than she probably realized. It was a reminder that, despite everything, I wasn't alone. I had friends who cared about me, who would help me through this dark time. The road to recovery was long and fraught with obstacles. There were days when the weight of the betrayal felt unbearable, and I wondered if I'd ever truly heal. But there were also days when the sun seemed a little brighter, when I could see a future beyond the pain. And so, I kept moving forward, one step at a time, determined to rebuild my life from the ashes of my shattered marriage. Revenge. It's a dish best served cold, they say, and I was about to find out just how satisfying it could be. The anger and betrayal I felt simmered beneath the surface, fueling a burning need to make both Lisa and Tom pay for what they had done. It wasn't enough to just walk away. They needed to feel the pain they had inflicted on me. I spent weeks meticulously planning my revenge, careful not to let on to anyone what I was up to. The first step was to gather more evidence. I knew that if I was going to destroy them, I needed irrefutable proof of their affair. With a mix of determination and cunning, I managed to hack into Lisa's email and phone records, uncovering a trove of incriminating messages and photos that detailed their sordid relationship. Next, I hired a private investigator to follow Tom. I wanted to know every move he made, every person he interacted with. The investigator provided me with a detailed report, complete with photos of Tom's indiscretions. It turns out, Lisa wasn't the only woman he had been seeing. My brother was a serial cheater, and now I had the evidence to expose him for the snake he was. Armed with this information, I set my plan into motion. The first target was Lisa's reputation. I created an anonymous email account and started sending the explicit photos and messages between Lisa and Tom to everyone in her professional network, her boss, her colleagues, and even her close friends. I made sure the email was untraceable, leaving no digital footprint that could lead back to me. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Lisa's boss called her into a meeting the very next day, and by the end of the week, she was fired for violating the company's code of conduct. Next, I turned my attention to Tom. Using the information I had gathered from the private investigator, I compiled a dossier of his affairs and sent it to his current girlfriend. Her reaction was swift and decisive. She dumped him, and not quietly either. She made sure everyone in their social circle knew exactly why she had broken up with him, effectively destroying his reputation. But I wasn't done yet. I knew I needed something more personal, something that would hit them where it hurt the most. I decided to use my knowledge of Tom's various side hustles. He had been involved in some shady business deals, ones that could get him into serious legal trouble if exposed. I anonymously tipped off the authorities, providing them with all the evidence they needed to launch an investigation. Within weeks, Tom was under scrutiny, his business ventures collapsing under the weight of legal pressure. The final piece of my revenge was the house. Lisa and I owned it jointly, but I had been the one making the majority of the payments. I decided to force a sale, leveraging the infidelity and her recent unemployment to get a favorable outcome in court. The judge ruled in my favor, and the house was sold. The proceeds were split, but given Lisa's financial instability, she quickly burned through her share. She had to move in with her parents, humiliated and broke. Seeing them both suffer brought me a twisted sense of satisfaction. Every time I heard about another one of their misfortunes, I felt a dark pleasure, knowing that I had orchestrated their downfall. I had taken everything from them, their reputations, their financial stability, and their sense of security. One evening, about a month after the house was sold, I decided to visit the old neighborhood. I drove past the house, now occupied by a new family, and felt a pang of nostalgia mixed with satisfaction. As I parked nearby and watched the lights flicker on inside, I felt a sense of closure. I had taken back control of my life, and in doing so, I had made them pay dearly for their betrayal. But revenge, I found, was a double-edged sword. As the initial thrill of their suffering began to fade, I was left with an emptiness that revenge couldn't fill. I had spent so much time plotting and executing my vengeance that I had neglected my own healing. I had destroyed them, yes, but now I needed to rebuild myself. It was time to let go of the anger and start focusing on my own future. The pleasure of revenge had served its purpose, but it was not a foundation on which to build a new life. And so, with a heavy heart but a clearer mind, I turned away from the past and began the long journey towards finding peace. After the storm of revenge had passed, I was left standing in the rubble of what had once been my life. The satisfaction I had felt from seeing Lisa and Tom brought low was fleeting, replaced by a deeper need to move forward. It was time to address the one thing that still tied me to Lisa: our marriage. I contacted Marcia, the tough-as-nails lawyer who had helped me gather the evidence against Lisa and Tom. We met in her office, a stark professional space that seemed to reflect her no-nonsense attitude.
"John,"
she greeted me as I walked in.
"I've already prepared the divorce papers based on what we discussed. All that's left is for you to sign." I sat down and reviewed the documents she handed me.
The terms were clear: an uncontested divorce, with me retaining the majority of our assets due to Lisa's infidelity. She would get a small settlement, enough to help her get back on her feet, but not enough to cause me any financial strain. "Are you sure this is what you want?" Marcia asked, her tone softer than usual. I nodded. "There's no going back from this. Our marriage is over." She didn't argue, simply handed me a pen. I signed the papers with a steady hand, feeling a strange sense of finality as I did so. This was the end of one chapter of my life and the beginning of another. Marcia took the papers and filed them with the court. The process was surprisingly quick. Within a few weeks, the divorce was finalized. I received the official decree in the mail, a stark white piece of paper that represented the legal end of my marriage. With the divorce finalized, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The legal ties that bound me to Lisa were severed, and I was free to move on with my life. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but it was a necessary step towards healing and rebuilding. I decided to meet with Lisa one last time to exchange the few remaining items we still had of each other's and to have a final conversation. We met at a neutral location, a small cafe downtown. Lisa looked worn, her usual confident demeanor replaced by a weary sadness. "John," she began, her voice subdued. "I know this doesn't mean much now, but I'm truly sorry for everything. I never meant for it to end like this." I looked at her, feeling a mix of emotions. "Lisa, what's done is done. We both made choices that led us here. I just want to move on." She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I understand. I wish you all the best, John. Truly." "Same to you," I replied, and with that, we parted ways. Leaving the cafe, I felt a strange sense of closure. There were no more loose ends, no more lingering doubts or unresolved feelings. The past was finally behind me, and it was time to focus on the future. I threw myself into my work and my hobbies, filling my days with activities that brought me joy and fulfillment. I reconnected with old friends, built new relationships, and slowly but surely began to heal. The scars of betrayal were still there, but they were no longer the defining features of my life. As the months passed, I found myself thinking less and less about Lisa and Tom. They were part of my past, a painful chapter that I had finally closed. The anger and hurt that had consumed me were replaced by a determination to build a better life for myself. One evening, as I sat on the balcony of my apartment, watching the sunset, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I had been through hell and back, but I had come out the other side stronger and wiser. I was ready to embrace whatever the future held, knowing that I had the strength to face any challenge that came my way. The divorce had been a painful but necessary step in my journey towards healing. It had allowed me to sever the toxic ties that bound me to my past and to start building a new life on my terms. I was no longer defined by the betrayal I had suffered, but by the resilience and determination I had found within myself. As I watched the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a renewed sense of hope and optimism. The future was a blank slate, full of possibilities, and I was ready to make the most of it. The sun had set on a tumultuous chapter of my life, and with the divorce finalized, I was free to rebuild my world from the ground up. The journey was far from easy, but each day brought new opportunities for growth and self-discovery. In the months that followed, I focused on myself. I took up new hobbies, reconnected with old friends, and made an effort to forge new relationships. The gym became my sanctuary, a place where I could channel my emotions into something positive. Running had always been a solace for me, and now it took on even greater significance. Each mile I ran was a step away from the past and towards a future that was entirely mine to shape. One evening, while attending a friend's dinner party, I met Emily. She was a friend of a friend, and we hit it off immediately. Emily was warm, funny, and genuine. Everything Lisa had ceased to be in our final years together. We spent the evening talking and laughing, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of genuine happiness. Emily and I started dating casually, and it wasn't long before our relationship deepened. She knew about my past, about the betrayal and the divorce, and she was patient and understanding. With her, I felt a sense of peace and contentment that had been missing from my life for so long. One day, while we were out hiking, a passion we both shared, I found myself opening up to her about the darkest moments of the past year. Emily listened without judgment, her presence a comforting balm to the lingering wounds of betrayal. "You've been through a lot, John," she said, squeezing my hand, "but you're strong, and you've come so far. I'm proud of you." Her words meant the world to me. They reaffirmed that I was on the right path, that the choices I had made to protect myself and move forward were the right ones. With Emily by my side, I felt ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring. Reflecting on the journey, I realized that I had learned valuable lessons from the experience. The betrayal by Lisa and Tom had shattered my world, but it had also forced me to confront my own shortcomings and to grow as a person. I had discovered a resilience within myself that I never knew existed. I learned the importance of trust, not just in others, but in myself. Trusting my instincts, recognizing red flags, and understanding my worth were all crucial steps in my healing process. I also learned the value of forgiveness, not for Lisa or Tom, but for myself. Forgiving myself for the blind trust I had placed in them, for the years spent in denial, and for the anger that had consumed me. The road to recovery had been long and difficult, but it had also been transformative. I'd emerged from the darkness stronger, wiser, and more self-assured. My life was no longer defined by the betrayal I had suffered, but by the choices I had made to rise above it. As I sat with Emily, overlooking a stunning sunset from the top of a hill, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. I was grateful for the support of friends like Mike, who had stood by me through the worst of times. I was grateful for the strength I had found within myself, and I was grateful for the new beginning that lay ahead. "What's on your mind?" Emily asked, leaning her head on my shoulder. "Just thinking about how far I've come," I replied, wrapping my arm around her, "and how excited I am for the future." She smiled, her eyes reflecting the golden hues of the setting sun. "Me too, John, me too." In that moment, I knew that I had truly moved on. The past was behind me, and the future was bright and full of possibilities. With Emily by my side, I was ready to embrace whatever came next. Life had taught me that even in the face of betrayal and heartbreak, it was possible to find happiness and love again. It had shown me that I was capable of rebuilding, of finding joy in new beginnings. And as I looked out over the horizon, I felt a sense of peace and contentment that I had thought was lost forever. The journey was far from over, but I was ready to face it with an open heart and a hopeful spirit. The future was mine to shape, and I was determined to make it a good one.